Spoiler warning. To avoid spoilers for the Dark Elf trilogy, please skip the section labeled Zaknafein vs. Montolio using the timestamps in the description down below. What's good, you incredible sci-fi fantasy nerds? Welcome back to the Half-Blood YouTuber channel, where today I want to talk with you all about a couple of books I read recently that I feel made for quite the dynamic reading duo. The Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore and Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. These are stories I can only describe as taking essentially the same trope and exploring it in dramatically different ways, which is why I highly recommend reading these two one after the other. Today, what I want to discuss with y'all is components of what I'll be referring to as the begin anew trope, the different ways it is executed within the Dark Elf trilogy in Legends and Lattes, and what I feel is the main takeaway from this story structure, while of course remaining as spoiler-free as possible. Without further ado, it is time to be extraordinary. The core of the begin anew trope is the goal of trying to escape one's past, which is a challenging task that comes with a long checklist. And this is where the beauty of this pairing really starts to present itself, as all the items on this checklist, that I managed to discern that is, are very much present in both stories, but to varying degrees. The most obvious example of this I can think of is the idea of needing to overcome the less than desirable reputation preceding someone born to an evil or savage race. In the Dark Elf trilogy, named after its drow protagonist Drizzt Do'Urden, it quickly becomes obvious that Menzoberranzan, the city of the drow, is an awful place to live. It is also obvious, therefore, that Drizzt's origins are going to bite him in the ass later in his journey. As a matter of fact, I would argue that this element of the begin anew trope becomes the driving force to the events of the third book in the trilogy, Sojourn. In Legends and Lattes, where the main character Viv is, quote, a battle-weary orc, this stumbling block isn't explored to the extent that it is in the Dark Elf trilogy, and that's simply because the circumstances do not call for it. Travis Baldree's goal in writing his novel, which now has a prequel bookshops and bone desk, go check it out, was to craft a comfy cozy experience intended as a break from epic fantasies like the Dark Elf trilogy. The way Baldree chose to implement this idea of overcoming prejudice, I thought, leads nicely to another element of the begin anew trope, emotional baggage. In my notes for this video, I described this section as guilt versus embarrassment and how the same feeling can manifest differently depending on the environment. And honestly, I also should have added depending on the person. The feeling I refer to is the emotional struggle both Viv and Drizzt encounter along their journeys. For Drizzt, his journey is that of trauma, of being hurt and, in his eyes, hurting those around him, either directly or indirectly. Naturally, the wayward drow develops a feeling of guilt for the events of the trilogy, and quite a bit of shame as well. Similarly, Viv does not look back at the inciting events for Legends and Lattes very fondly. Given the atmosphere of the novel, I would describe her struggle more so as embarrassment and especially regret, because I feel that, fitting the vibe of her story, they are less severe versions of the same emotion Drizzt deals with. I think she regrets how she handled the inciting events and feels embarrassed about who she is and how others perceive her. However, one of the more beautiful, optimistic parts of the begin anew trope is the physical manifestation of a haunting past, because this is the part of the story where we get to see the growth of the main character through how they choose to deal with this particular obstacle. How Drizzt and Viv decide to deal with their less than welcome visitors shows their evolution as people and how they have chosen to reinvent themselves, or, as some might argue, how they have chosen to embrace who they were the entire time. This is the section of the video where it is especially easy to delve into spoilers, so I won't say much else other than that I think this is the part of beginning anew where Drizzt and Viv show the reader just how similar they are as people. The next section of this video is not necessarily breaking down an aspect of the begin anew trope, but simply pointing out something about Drizzt's story that I found particularly cool. In the Dark Elf trilogy, Book 1, Homeland, Drizzt feels ostracized in the chaotically evil drow city of Menzoberranzan. Yet at the same time, he also feels trapped within the greater landscape of the Underdark, where the only safe place for a drow for many miles is, funny enough, Menzoberranzan. Drizd's father, Zaknafein, feels the exact same way and believes that Menzoberranzan made his decision for him a long time ago. Fast forward to the third book in the trilogy, Sojourn, where Drizzt meets a blind ranger named Montolio, who has learned to use his other heightened senses and the fact that people always underestimate a blind man to his advantage. The reason I point all of this out is because I think it is beautifully symbolic of how not only Drizzt, but also the world around him evolves throughout the trilogy. The best way I can describe what I saw here is through a good old-fashioned Harry Potter reference. In Harry Potter, there are the two major eras at Hogwarts, the Marauders era and the Golden Trio era. Specifically focusing on Peter Pettigrew of the Marauders and Neville Longbottom from the Golden Trio era, there is a popular analysis of the series that I completely agree with, by the way, that claims Peter and Neville are essentially the same character, except Neville was brave enough to evolve as a character and Peter was not. I see a similar dynamic taking place in the Dark Elf trilogy, where Zaknafein is Peter Pettigrew, Montolio is Neville Longbottom, and Drizzt is, well, kind of both. I say Drizzt is kind of both because I do believe, much like Zaknafein, he too felt forced to be Peter Pettigrew, until a major confrontation occurs that pushes him to become Neville Longbottom. In case none of this made sense to you, I beg you to read the Dark Elf trilogy, and Legends and Lattes afterward, of course, and hopefully you see what I was trying to explain here. The very last thing I want to touch on before I end here is the fact that Drizzt and Viv are at very different points in their lives. In fact, the reason I recommend reading the Dark Elf trilogy and then Legends and Lattes is because Drizd's story ends as he sets off into the very same type of life that sparked the start of Viv's story. I point this out especially because I feel that it proves that the begin anew trope is truly universal. It can occur at any time, in any place, to anyone. I believe, to end on an optimistic note, this proves that anyone can become a better person at any point in their life if they have the courage and the desire to do so. And that's it for the video. Thank you so much for watching it through to completion. I truly appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like and share it with anyone else you think might enjoy it as well. Have you read either or both of these books? Did you love them too? Did you see them the same way I did? If not, what did you take away from these stories? Also, does this story structure have an official name? If so, does anybody know what it is? Leave all your thoughts in the form of the 3 C's, comments, constructive criticism, and conversation in the Patronus section down below. As always, if you'd like to join an online community of incredible sci-fi fantasy nerds, make sure to subscribe to this here Half-Blood YouTuber channel, and if you'd like to be notified when future videos are uploaded, make sure to ring that notification bell as well. But that's all I've got for y'all today, so stay extraordinary, you incredible sci-fi fantasy nerds. Peace.